right, we'll start it now. Okay, well, yeah, we're starting now. But we were just having a nice natural conversation.
about
Yeah.
Not about anything in particular.
Yeah, not about any kind of item that you would buy from a CD store on State Street. But,
No,
yeah.
certainly not that.
I was gonna say, you seem a little bit, not disheveled, but you look a little bit tossed a little bit.
Tossed?
Yeah, a little,
Me?
it's like your head's been tossed. A little salad tossing on the hair. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just I took off my head and gave it to some, kids in India just to
play
kick
soccer
around.
with. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Your head is like those like plastic purple balls they like play soccer with for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like someone get these kids a real ball. Why are they playing soccer with like a bunch of actual socks that have been tied together with a rubber band?
Yeah.
It's like don't they make plastic over there? Just make a ball. So that can't be that hard. All right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You
Whatever.
got to. They have enough. Like I don't know.
They have no problem.
What do you make a ball out of? Even if you had to make a ball, if you like got really into soccer in your village, in your slum, and then you had to make a ball.
Clay or something? Like a clay, like really heavy ball. With
You've
basically that like Incan sport, like the ancient Incans played.
Where they just kick rocks around.
Yeah, they had like a hoop like on the wall. You just like throw it through the hoop.
Yeah.
It was like really hard. Yeah.
Yeah, and the hoop was vertical.
Yeah, it was like really wrong. I mean, a pretty inferior sport to today's sports.
I like that we're starting it off with history we learned from Road to El Dorado.
Yeah,
Road to El Dorado.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, like it's one thing to learn history from like Apocalypto, which they actually researched, like it's in the native tongue and everything. But it's another thing to source from Road to El Dorado.
Yeah.
Puma and that saucy native girl.
Oh my god. We're all so horny.
I know. This is really uncomfortable already. This is like 2 months in.
And that saucy native girl.
Yeah.
Oh, where
she
does
was
that...
a good one. I think she was more effective than Pocahontas, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, because Pocahontas is like she's regal, so of course you put on a coin. But you never put like that saucy girl on a coin.
No,
get assaulted.
I don't think Pocahontas is on a coin. Also,
I think that's
Sacagawea. Yeah.
Wrong. The other one. That's
yeah. They're not all the same, Arash.
Yeah, but they both consorted with white men, so traitors to their race or whatever.
It's like
Sacagawea, she was in close with those Lewis and Clark. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Yeah, she had no loyalty to her own kind.
Like a racist Matthew McConaughey is like, you know what I like about native girls?
Yeah, yeah. I keep colonizing, and they all look the same. Yeah,
they stay the same race.
Yeah, different countries, same girl. Yeah. Oh God. Oh, they should make like a Days of Confused about like colonization.
They should make that. Yeah. I know, but my hair is disheveled because I can't get a haircut ever. I thought about cutting my own hair, but then I realized that the top I would have fun with, but once I started doing the back, I would no longer have fun.
Yeah, the neck's a mess. I kind of have thought about just shaving it all off, but then I'm scared. Like, what if this is the last time I'll ever have hair? Then I'll never see it again.
I have a friend who claims that he went bald because he shaved his head and it just did not grow back.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. That's horrible. If you just, oh, it'd be horrible.
Yeah.
If the virus took your hair and your, it sucks. Is like it seems every now and then there's like a generation that just gets like unlucky and they have to live through some horrible event. I think we're gonna be one of those guys.
Yeah, man.
Where it's like, oh man, like it's like there was that one generation. The one generation that had to fight in World War I. They get decimated. They have trauma, mental illnesses forever. Their lives are irreparably ruined. Then the next generation just gets to enjoy the 20s. Like they don't miss out. Like they're like, oh, I could have been 5 years younger and I wouldn't have to have fought in the Verdun.
Yeah. This is nice. Yeah, wow, the 20s are really nice.
Yeah. Well, man, his 20s are not. It's like, why do you enjoy this party? It's like, because I have shell shock and no one even knows what that means.
Yeah,
no one believes me when I say I have mental illness.
It seems like there's always a really fun, loose post-war generation.
Exactly, yeah.
Like you had not the 1920s, and then you had the 1960s after World War II, and then it took a while for it to hit, but it hit.
Yeah, no, there's like millennials like us. We're just like, jobless and like weak. And then there's like Zoomers with Snapchat and they all make 40 grand a year on OnlyFans. This is disgusting. Yeah.
40 grand a year
Yeah.
on OnlyFans.
That's probably not a decent income anyway. But never mind. Depends where
I
you are.
know.
Yeah.
Oh, I recently talked somebody out of going on OnlyFans, I
Good
think.
for you. Wow, that's a very hard thing to do. It's like talking. It's probably easy to talk someone off a ledge than it is to do.
I was just really mean.
You're too ugly for this. Yeah.
Oh, I told her she was too smart for that. I was like, come
Um,
on, you're not gonna do that.
that's an interesting neg that you say they're too smart to be that much of a whore.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm all for sex work. I'm all for
Yeah.
that. This person in particular, I was like, I just think it's like beneath your intelligence to do that.
Yeah,
I don't know.
exactly. Like, don't you want when people Google you, they want to see your, you want to show up your LinkedIn, your journals, and
Mhm.
scientific publications.
But if
You want
I
to have
if
like you with
I
a microscope, and then next one's like OnlyFans. Yeah.
but if I knew I could make money doing that, I would do it.
Oh, really? You would just go like your dignity doesn't matter. Like I'll just do
No,
it.
I wouldn't fucking care. I would have to be talked out of it. I would be one of those people. Because if I thought that just by posting pictures of my wee wee I would get a lot of money, I would do that.
But there's two guilty parties. There's like people who think they're attractive and then make them, and then there's like who aren't attractive, and then there's also the weird people who just like throw their money at it. Like they're almost as guilty. Like it's like what are you doing boosting your confidence? Like
Oh no.
yeah, I mean it's no one's fault that they made an OnlyFans. It's the OnlyFans consumers' fault because they're like just a bunch of hungry.
It's
Folks.
it's
Yeah.
only the fans' fault.
Yeah, it is only the fans' fault.
It's
Yeah,
only fans that make that happen.
they're like lemmings. It's just awful. Like I can't imagine spending that much money on, because like from what I've read, like everyone is like, oh, it's different than pornography because it's like you have like a connection with the person. And it's like they're like your friend.
Oh Jesus,
It's
I've
like
not
really
heard
weird.
that.
Yeah, it's like Jesus
Oh
Christ.
my
Like,
God.
I thought I was socially inept. At least I like at least I'm a loser in real life. Like I'll deal with
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
But except I can get set off by the smallest thing, so I don't need OnlyFans. Like
Yeah.
I can I'll just like see somebody's midriff when I'm walking and then I have to run home.
But I'm so grateful for that like instinct. Like I'm so glad I still have that in me that I'm not like completely debased into this like feral online animal. You know what I mean? Like,
I
yeah, like
know.
I'm just glad we have like a 1800 sensibility when it comes to
I
it.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because like yeah, oh man, yeah. I mean, obviously, like I'm just joking. Like I'm not knocking anybody for making an OnlyFans. That's great.
It's
But
also not good that my first instinct wasn't maybe to talk to her, that I had to just run home. And like I thought she was really attractive.
probably because she would
But
like if she just looked and you're like coming from the horizon, like running towards it.
I know.
Yeah.
Like I get home and then I'm like, wait a minute, what am I doing? And I run toward her and she's like, is that lubricant in your hand?
Yeah.
I was like, no. I wipe it on the grass really quick.
Oh god. Yeah, your hands are like glistening. You're like, what is that? Astroglide? Oh god.
When you're in the bushes doing this, it's just really
That awful noise, like the. Yeah, well, honestly, like, yeah, because I think back in the day they had a solution for that. It's like if you saw some girl's ankle and it made you excited, instead of like being a creep about it, you just write like a poem. You would pursue their
Yeah.
father. You'd like be like, I would like her hand in marriage.
One time I threw a paper airplane with my number at it at a woman in a coffee shop, and she laughed so hard. I felt great. And then we texted for a minute, and then I stopped texting her once I quoted SpongeBob, and she said she knew what it was from, and just said, "Yeah, I don't really watch cartoons." And I just stopped texting her.
God, something like getting a dry response.
I
Like,
know.
yeah,
I was like,
it must have sucked writing like a whole long letter, and you're like, "Dear Beatrice, like I wish you well. I'm in the front lines of the Civil War," and then she just sends back like, "Yeah, I don't really read Dickens." And you're like, "Fuck you, then. All right,
yeah.
I could have sent a letter to anybody. It's fucking
Yeah.
bitch."
My stance
Yeah.
on that would have been that she should watch SpongeBob because among cartoons it's a masterpiece.
Yeah, no,
But,
it's thematically it's great.
Yeah, but among literature, Dickens really sucks.
Yeah.
So she just has it all turned around.
Yeah. Yeah, she's like a great opinion until sucks.
like maybe Dickens is more you can learn more from Dickens than SpongeBob, but if you're gonna read literature, don't read Dickens. What are you doing?
I know that is very like 10th grade. It's like, oh
I know.
yeah. So what would you
It's
read next?
like
Yeah.
it's
Cyrano de
very
Bergerac. Yeah.
it's very high school English teacher who wanted to write but couldn't, and then
Oh God. Yeah. Yeah.
you know who you should read is Dickens.
Oh God. Yeah. And they're like cornering you. Like they have their like, arm on the door frame. Like what like you pass until they tell you. They're
Yeah.
like, listen, Dickens, Hard Times, great book. And you're like, Mr. Johnson, I want to get to my next class. It's like, all right.
Hard Times, great book.
Yeah, God. I tried reading that book. It starts off pretty well, but it's like it has some cool characters, but they just like kind of suffer vaguely for like 400
Yeah,
pages. It makes no sense. It's just like he gets black lung, and then he like gets
I know.
poor, like none of it goes anywhere. They're just
Yeah,
poor for like a
it is.
while.
It
Yeah,
is the trash of the time. Just like
yeah. I'm like, all
and
right, I get it. Like Jesus, like it's like
I
Rent.
was.
Like who cares? Like,
Oh, I was
way
reading.
yeah.
Have you read any Samuel Johnson?
No, actually, I haven't heard of Samuel Johnson.
He wrote the first dictionary. He was that guy.
Oh, that guy. Yeah.
Yeah, but he has an essay called, it's like 80 pages, called Preface to Shakespeare. I've been reading. That's so good.
It's like
It's
pretty
so
readable
good.
now, like on today's terms. You can like.
Yeah, I mean, it's in old language, but it's so witty, and every sentence of his kind of stands on its own. He writes in a very logical, sort of
Is he like?
philosophical
Is it
style.
prose Shakespeare, or is it just like, listen, this is the preface to this hack. I don't want you to like, or is he?
I mean, he's really fair.
Oh,
He
okay.
says Shakespeare is a genius because he was a poet of nature, and he
That's interesting.
wasn't. He said there's this other playwright of the time, Addison, who wrote a play called Cato, and then
Wait,
he
I've heard
said,
that seems familiar. Or Cato seems. Yeah. Okay.
but Voltaire, who was I think just before Samuel Johnson came around, was he talked about how Voltaire thought Addison was superior to Shakespeare. And
Whoa.
then yeah, so he said why is everybody talking about this fucking Shakespeare character? Look at Addison, look at his speech of
Oh man, so,
Cato.
so no one ever gets their dues. Like it's like in comedy. They're like, why is this guy famous? He's just like
Yeah,
he's just taking his shirt off on stage. I'm like, ah, come on.
yeah.
Like,
It's the
you have to get
impulse.
jokes. Yeah.
It's the impulse where there's somebody who's legitimately better than everyone else, and you kind of downsize them by saying, well, what about him? And you point
Yeah.
to somebody lesser who's kind of unique. It's like they're good.
No, that's like in everything where everyone's like, like Michael Jordan's the greatest basketball player, but there's that one guy who has to be like super esoteric. Like, no, actually, it was Oscar Johnson in 1976. You're like, who
Yeah.
cares about that?
You have those people who aren't quite as narcissistic as the
Yeah,
people who actually do the sport. They're like, nah, it's me.
yeah. They're like, no, it's of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Have you read my play? No.
Haven't you read my play?
Yeah,
The people who just like an underdog and invent one. They
yeah. He
just
just like
invent
slides
it.
you a little manuscript. It's like
Yeah.
it's called The Storm. It's not related to the Tempest at all. It's not another. Yeah, yeah.
I love that. But
It's a little treatment I wrote. Just maybe just like look at it, maybe take some notes down.
oh yeah. But yeah, so Voltaire, Addison was more of a writerly writer, whereas Shakespeare wrote more so that it can be interpreted by an actor. He was more open to
Okay. So he was like for the
interpretation.
stage. Like it's okay.
Yeah,
That makes
whereas
sense
Addison,
actually.
yeah, Addison was more of an essayist than a poet,
Okay.
and Shakespeare was more of a poet than an essayist.
Yeah, because wasn't he the sonnets and his like whatever? Was he the iambic pentameter guy?
A lot of them were, but him too. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. Because I remember reading one of the sonnets where it's like, if I were to compare you to a whatever, to a,
yeah.
a sonnet, I forgot how it goes.
Compare thee to a summer's day.
There we go. That's the one. I
Yeah,
thought it was like a summer's rose or something. I don't know.
yeah. That poem has like a roast in it.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I can't remember where it was, but at some point he says something that's kind of a backhanded compliment to whoever who's writing it to
He's like, and your head is big, and you have
him.
weird toes. Yeah.
Your lips are big and luscious because your head is big.
Yeah, because your head is big. You're goofy. You're a goofy looking woman. Yeah.
You're goofy looking lady. Um, but yeah, so Samuel Johnson basically says Shakespeare's genius is that he writes in a way that the human mind can understand. We can put ourselves in these characters' shoes. Addison's lines are better on the page because he writes with something more in mind. Whereas he says Addison and writers like him are like gardens where they're very intricate and they're neatly sectioned and things like that.
That's
And
interesting.
he said Shakespeare was more like a forest with all with the greater beauty of a forest, but also having the brambles and all this. And
Oh, so he's like a rough on the edges kind of guy.
mm-hmm.
That's interesting because it's like we all look at them as he's like kind of like kind of old like you know what I mean, like old sterile kind of figures, but like back then he was seen as like a kind of rogue like dude.
Right, and
That's interesting.
he was, and he a lot of people didn't like him at the time because he wrote for the popular stage. He
Right,
wrote it.
the Globe. Yeah, he was in the
Yeah. He was an actor first, so he knew what would get an audience going.
Ah, that's
And so it was kind of, I mean, he sort of blended um, the there's a real tradition in all literature of blending sort of popular genres with good literature. I mean, Camus, I think, did that with the noir. He made like a couple noir novels that were
Oh, I
also
didn't know that.
philosophical novels.
I
I
should
believe it
read
was
more of him.
him.
I actually don't know a lot about. I just know like the Sisyphus
Yeah.
guy. Sisyphus. That's all I know.
Well, I'm paraphrasing John Gardner, and I haven't read any Camus
John Gardner. Okay, I should. Oh.
because the idea of a philosophical novel kind of puts me off.
Yeah.
They just kind of
Yeah, because you just open it like, all right, here we go.
Yeah.
let's
I'm more of the Nabokov school, and Nabokov said that ideas were the last ditch of the bad novelist, and he thought a novel should be about immersing you and putting you.
Yeah, I think we talked about this. Like, yeah, where he was like, no one wants like just a big bunch of word vomit of like, here's my point. We should just show it through the story. Yeah.
And he hated Dostoevsky for that reason.
Right. Okay.
But Dostoevsky's novel, I don't know that I would call it a philosophical novel in that it was trying to explore like one point. His novels had so many ideas in them. I would differentiate it by saying that Dostoevsky wrote novels of ideas, and people like Sartre and Camus wrote philosophical novels, which were much more using characters as sort of pawns. Well, I think it was Italo Calvino who said, philosophy fashions the chess pieces and literature moves them on the board.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's a good quote. It's like one of those quotes I want like on my study.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Like it's like a quote you meditate at, like you're just looking at it. Yeah.
Right. Dostoevsky sort of made a lot of characters who had a lot of opinions, and then they discussed them, and then the ideas would sort of be borne out by the themes, which were a lot less important than the conversations.
Oh, that's interesting.
Camus doesn't have very many like conversations like that where they're well-formed people who just have all these intricate, complex opinions. But his characters would like, as far as I understand it, his characters would like, I've just read some criticism of him, but his characters would sort of represent an idea. This would be this idea. This guy would be this idea. This guy would be this idea.
So it's like, like this guy represents greed. This is like okay.
Yeah.
That's actually not a bad way to do it, though. I mean, it seems like they're like both kind of correct. Like you could go either Nabokov style or Dostoevsky style,
Yeah.
There's different effects. Like, yeah.
I mean, Dostoevsky's novels were basically excuses for essays.
Right. Okay.
Which is a lot of fun also. I mean, he could really explore all sides of an issue. He was sort of a religious man, but Brothers Karamazov famously has some of the best arguments against God that there are, because he was able to create a character who had those thoughts and had intelligence equal to Dostoevsky.
Dude, I just bought that book, but I haven't read it yet. I should really, because I've heard that's like the best one.
Yeah, I read it a long time ago. There's the passage that's really famous, the Grand Inquisitor.
Oh.
If you want to read that, that'll give you just a good idea of how Dostoevsky writes and what he does at his best.
Oh, hell yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I've read Crime and Punishment, and some of it was like prison journal stuff. But that was like more like, I'm just in prison, it sucked.
Did you know what? Do you know what translation you got? Was it Constance Garnett?
Oh, I mean, this is like high school. Yeah, it was Notes from the Underground. That's what it was. Yeah.
No. Oh, Notes from Underground. Okay,
Yeah.
I see.
I actually watched it because in the UK office, they like reference it as a joke. So I was like, oh, I want to read that. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
It was like years ago.
What was the joke?
Oh, so dude, it's fucking great because it was they had this like new like hot like temp, and he's just like he's like I just everyone loves him. And he's like super smart, so he just keeps like he's been on like Jeopardy, and he just knows he knows all these like Dostoevsky facts. So Ricky Gervais's character keeps trying to like one up him. So he'd be like, Dostoevsky was born in 1860. It's like, oh yeah, I mean that's when he wrote Notes from the Underground. And Ricky Gervais like goes back to his computer, like Googles it, and comes back, and like keeps like challenging. It's such a funny. I love that show.
That's so funny. Yeah,
Keep like bothering him.
Ricky Gervais annoys me, but his conceptual comedy,
Yeah.
like the way he talks about what is funny, is really cool.
Dude, no, he is great. Like I kind of wish he just wouldn't, be such a cringe fest when it comes to atheism. Because like he's a really funny guy. Besides all that, like, he's hilarious.
And also his ideas about dumb humor are really annoying.
Oh, where he's like, like you should do stand up this way, and
yeah, he's like, well, we like dumb humor because we, it's like we're educated people and we like it ironically. And then Louis C.K. was on that too, and
the talking funny. Yeah, that kind of rubbed me with the wrong. Because eventually he's like comparing himself to like the greatest comedians ever, and he's just like.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a great comedy writer. I just think he's like.
Yeah, he's certainly a narcissist.
For sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, and it's always like, he's like, oh, I'm talking down to you, like I'm like espousing this great essay, No, I was actually gonna say like the whole like not to talk shop too much, but it's interesting that like in literature they have always like discussions of like this is an essay, it's a character, like. But like I don't know, like that's interesting if you applied it to jokes. Like if there was like a Nabokov thing to jokes.
I don't know.
Like
there's
I don't know.
I mean, for laugh out loud humor, I think you can intellectualize dumb things and you can be dumb about intellectual things.
Yeah.
But being dumb about dumb things and being intellectual about intellectual things doesn't make me happy.
Yeah, it's not really much. Well, especially because you have to fit inside the whole like formula of a joke, because jokes have to be a certain way.
Yeah.
It has to be like a payoff. So like that's always hard. Yeah.
Oh, it's hard. The payoff.
Well, it's funny. It's especially the whole like where it sounds intellectual, but that was just the way to get to a dumb joke.
Yeah, I like that too.
That is my favorite. Actually, that's probably like
that's so funny.
Most, yeah, that's like all our jokes.
Yeah, just explaining. I want to have a joke that just explains a really intricate idea, and I'm just explaining it forever just to set up a really stupid pun.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Just to.
Which is weird. I don't know. Like it's hard to say. Yeah. I don't know. It's strange.
That'd be funny. So bimetallism is where. And then you just set up a really stupid pun. So I guess you could say that the metal swings both ways.
Yeah, and you're like, wait a second, this isn't my bus. And everyone's laughing. You're like,
where are you going?
Yeah. Oh god. I'm on such like comedy withdrawal. I need it.
Oh.
I've just been watching the Jerry Seinfeld comedian documentary like once a day. It's horrible.
I started watching the Colin Quinn thing you sent me. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically all I wanted to say about Samuel Johnson is that he gets, he's a very fair critic, and he answers a lot. He answers a lot of the critics of the time, and he also talks about Shakespeare's faults. His biggest beef with Shakespeare is that Shakespeare always chooses an easy ending. He's just like, the endings are all easy.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Actually, I mean, like, what's the most, like, I mean, Hamlet, dies, Macbeth dies, Romeo and Juliet, they just die.
They just die. King Lear dies.
You really just simplify, because it's like, like, maybe the whole family could have a nice, intricate conversation. He's like, I'll just kill you all off, so I don't have to write that. Yeah, he's like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. And that was a sort of the idea with tragedies, but they are really easy a lot of the time. I mean, Romeo and Juliet at least die in a clever way. It's like, well, he dies, but she's not dead, and then he thinks she's dead, so he kills himself. And then she sees that he's dead and thought she was dead, and then she kills herself. And then that's kind of fun. But
and like his comedies, also his like comedies versus his tragedies. Like I don't know, I think I actually like his Comedy is a bit more like Comedy of Errors is pretty dope.
Yeah,
King of the Shrew is pretty funny. Midsummer
that's
Night's
what
Dream, good shit.
that's what Samuel Johnson said. He said
Oh, really?
that Shakespeare's natural tendency was to comedy, and when he does tragedy, you can see him more at work in that than you see him doing comedy. He says it's more effortless. He said that in Shakespeare's comedies, he does without labor what no labor can improve.
That's a good review. Damn, imagine if someone wrote
Yeah.
like that about you. I'd feel so honored.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
pretty deep. Yeah.
I love it. And then
God.
he talked about how uneducated Shakespeare was too. How like by the standards of the time, he was pretty uneducated. How he probably had a sort of skeletal understanding of Latin and Greek.
Dude, okay, so I was actually curious about his education too, because so he has a lot of like. It seems like a lot of the time when he does like historical plays, he always does like ancient Greece or something like Julius Caesar,
Yeah.
Roman, like Rome. Was that like back then? Was that just like common? Like, is that what you kind of knew, like standard history? Like everyone
Well,
kind of knows ancient Rome. Everyone knows this. Like
Samuel Johnson talks about how I should just call him Johnny Boy.
Johnny Boy, yeah, Sam
Because
SJ over here.
Johnny,
Yeah,
old Johnny Boy just
yeah,
talks
old
about.
Johnny. Yeah.
he talked about how a lot of Shakespeare's references were done to works that were recently translated into English.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's like if someone read like a Time magazine article that everyone read and just wrote like a play on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
It's like
Oh, yeah.
everyone's listening to Dan Carlin and knows the same shit about history.
That's so funny. Yeah.
That's pretty much what it was.
Oh, because I always thought that like Shakespeare had tracked down some ancient tome. It was like, oh, Julius Caesar, I got it. But no, it's like everyone fucking knows that. Yeah. Okay, never mind.
I was trying to write a joke before stand-up died about how medicine didn't always used to be this way. It was just really a recent thing that medicine was at all reliable. I mean, the murder of Caesar when he was stabbed 27 times by 5 or 6 assailants, that was an early surgery.
Yeah, like this is a vaccine. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah.
He just dipped the knives.
Surgery. Yeah.
Yeah, that was an early surgery. It was a cesarean section, actually.
That's actually an interesting thing. Like Shakespeare was like pop culture back then. Like,
yeah,
so like Caesar gets stabbed on stage, and all the peasants are like, "Oh, I read about that." Yeah, like,
yeah, I read about that.
Oh, yeah, that's the thing that happened.
Oh, this is what it is.
I heard about that. I did. Yeah. Oh, I knew about that.
And he had
they stabbed Caesar. They did. Yeah.
And he had a lot more education than the people he was playing to did a lot of the time.
Okay.
He was also, also pretty good. I mean, a lot of the playwrights wrote for high audiences, like Addison wrote for the elite, I believe.
Oh, okay. But didn't like the Queen go to Shakespeare too? Like everyone was going. It was like a boxing match. Like even the poor and rich were all going.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And then, but his plays are things that can be enjoyed by everyone. I mean, it's basically gossip. I mean,
it kind of makes sense though, because now it kind of makes sense of like, okay, like he was great, but he wasn't like the greatest because he just made a lot of entertainment. But he's not like
he made a lot of entertainment, but where he did well was just in his natural talent. He just had more natural talent than the other people.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Whereas they made up a lot. They made up a lot of it with learning. That's sort of the idea with a lot of the greatest artists of history. Like I think Lincoln was the best prose stylist that America produced. Lincoln. And he wasn't that educated. I mean, he read the King James Bible, Shakespeare, the Metamorphosis, and Euclid, and that was about it. What
else do you need? Yeah.
He wrote the best prose coming out of America, I think.
Oh man.
But also, when you were reading about Marx, did you read at all about his friendship with Lincoln?
Oh, I have heard about that, where they actually wrote each other. Like when Lincoln was in the White House, he actually like wrote him apparently. And he was it's pretty crazy. Dude, Lincoln had some fucking radical cohorts. Like Frederick Douglass was like super, like for that time he was like ridiculously radical.
Yeah.
Like he was like one of the he actually kind of swayed Lincoln to be more sympathetic towards like Black people in the South, and like he was like, you don't understand how fucking awful slavery is. Like it's pretty crazy. Yeah. Like Lincoln was pretty interesting, man. He was
probably the most psychologically interesting president we've had. He was really interesting. He was really interesting. I mean, he had his flaws too, but they were so overshadowed by his genius.
Yeah, well, especially also because back then the U.S. wasn't this like imperialist giant global country. It was just like a new project. So like everybody was like, oh, it's
Yeah,
exciting because it
I
was only like
know.
60 years old. They're like, oh wow, this is like fucking new. Like it's yeah, anything could
Yeah.
happen here. This is interesting.
He
Yeah.
talked in one of his speeches about he said Lincoln said something like he was reading a lot of Marx at the time, we think,
Oh,
but he said something like labor is the antecedent of capital
oh my
and it is
god.
therefore superior to capital, and then you just read it and you're like, oh.
Whoa. Well,
That's
it's pretty ironic that the guy who killed him was like, "You die, you tyrant." Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
But no, he was trying to do good stuff.
he did do good things. He sort of did it by a couple acts which were against the Constitution,
Yeah.
but
Well, because it wasn't
but
the Reconstruction was a lot of his stuff, wasn't it? I
I'm
don't know.
not sure, but I uh, I do know that, I mean, the suspension of habeas corpus was not a great thing, not a great spot in his presidency, and the institution of the draft, while necessary, was um, I mean, the USA was basically founded on principles of entitlement, just like
Yeah.
you're all entitled to this, and that gets tricky when you need soldiers to end slavery.
Dude, it was pretty crazy. I remember I was reading that book about like New York's history and like how like New York was like one of the hubs they were like drafted one from. But
Yeah,
like, all the battalions were like by like ethnicity. So it was like they had like Irish battalions, Scottish battalions, but they would send like way more Irish people than anyone else. And it
I
would just be like, and they would all just get killed, and there'd be like no Irish people. It was like, insane. Like, and then like they had like riots. They had like the very famous draft riots in New York, but it was like kind
yeah,
of fucked up because then all the whites in New York like blamed the free black people in New York and like, oh, this war of yours is getting all of us killed out there. They like lynched a bunch of people in New York the draft riots. It was like really fucked up.
yeah,
Like it was horrible.
not so good. But
Yeah, and
when
like
you
they
when
had to like hide out to like not get found by these like lynch mobs and shit. It was
yeah,
crazy. Like yeah, like there was a lot of like friction between like the Irish and the black population. It was like nuts.
and it's hard to look at that time as those decisions by Lincoln as anything other than a guy who looked at the laws and said these have to be controverted because human
Yeah.
law is higher.
Well, especially also
Um,
because states had a lot more like autonomy. Like they were just doing a
mm,
lot of their own shit. So like I think all he could do was like kind of steer the ship. Like he couldn't be
yeah,
like, oh, if you don't do what I say, I'll march an army over there. It's like
yeah.
they can do whatever they want. Like they're not like yeah,
I
like
mean,
there's only like 20 states. They're not gonna care. But
yeah, he did
yeah,
what he had to do, but
yeah,
he saw that moral law was higher than the law of the land,
yeah.
and and went against it sometimes.
Yeah, it's interesting because like the North, like I was thinking like, what if the North just went to war with the South, but like didn't even care about slavery? That'd be so weird. They're like, we just want to like we're only mad because he's seceded. We don't even care about the other stuff.
Yeah.
That'd be horrible. If they just kept it there, that'd be like, oh my god.
Who had it was Colbert, the Colbert Report, who had a segment when Texas was talking about seceding from the Union
Oh,
called called If at First You Don't Secede.
oh, that's
That's
great.
that's primo.
Oh
That's
man, that's crazy.
primo.
Yeah, well, it's nuts because yeah, like how just like new everything was. Like they just because well, because I remember it was the same in World War One because like Germany was founded, like modern Germany was founded in like 1860, and then like but by like World War One it was only like 70 years old. So it's like this is
Yeah.
like barely a country. So it's yeah, it's pretty nuts that
Yeah,
that all
man.
happened.
It's so nuts. And then you look at the change of uniform over that time. And that's how I think of time going past is just you had 1776 and then 1800 wasn't too
Yeah,
long after that, and then World War I wasn't too long after
right.
1800,
Yeah,
about 100 years.
it definitely got like more and more drab and bland. Like it
Yeah,
started out like pointy hats, like blouses, and
pointy
like one
hats.
guy
Yeah,
would get hit by a musket. He's like, ah, and everyone's like, oh, you hold on, stop everything. And he got shot. And like, yeah. Then it's
yeah.
like Civil War. They're all wearing like blue caps, gray. Then World War One, it's just gas masks, dirt.
You know,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
The dust and blood sort of poofing out from somebody as you
Yeah,
As
exactly.
the uniform they haven't washed in forever gets hit by a musket ball.
Yeah,
It
it
just
just
like
looks like it just looks like you're beating a rug. Like you're yeah, yeah,
like
yeah,
old Italian women in New York
yeah, like
beating
yeah,
have a rug out the window, just shaking it.
like ah, oh god. Dude, oh man, yeah, the Civil War was because that was like the first war was like, okay, this is actually pretty bad. Like, because I remember they had that story where like in the Civil War, like people would because back then like battles were so fancy, you would just go to like watch battles, like you'd be like, oh, a battle, this is cool. So then
I
like
know.
watching a battle, and then like it wouldn't end, and people actually started dying by like the thousands, and they're like, oh Jesus, like this is horrible. Like, yeah,
And then in the American Revolution, you saw like that style of war sort of pioneered by Americans because
yeah, they were like guerrillas. They're like hiding in the trees and shit, like shooting. Yeah,
yeah, it
yeah, and the
wasn't it,
British were like in rows marching at them and stuff.
yeah, you were supposed to conduct a civilized war so that people
Yeah,
could be, on a mountaintop watching it and be like, "Oh, this is a lovely war,
yeah,
isn't it?"
some general with like a sand table, like pushing little figurines with a broom. Yeah,
I know.
in real time. It's like, okay, put the cavalry over here. Like, ah, and everyone's like, ah, war. It was like a fun time. Yeah.
I know. And then I don't and then I think it's baffling to me how you decided who was a good general, who won back then.
Yeah, oh
How do
yeah,
you
yeah.
decide who won? And then they talk about it like they were all in rows like that, and then there were certain rules. And then you had Napoleon, and they were like, yeah, when there were all these rules, Napoleon was the best general.
Dude, once again, it's like Michael Jordan. Like, well, I guess he is the greatest of all time, but only because the rules were made around him to make him
Yeah,
succeed. Yeah,
yeah, he just had that sort of orderly mind. And
yeah.
then when he was set up against, imagine him being up against, um, like just one of the Visigoth
Oh yeah.
kings or something. Just all these men running at them with axes. You're like, ah, 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 and they just turn tail.
Dude, yeah, it's like Prussia was like very famous for its generals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know much about Prussia besides that they're like everybody was like every Prussian was like a general. I don't know I don't know
The
what else their export was.
well,
Like
there a lot of the export was
war.
mercenaries. A lot of the time,
Wait, what?
there were a lot of Prussian mercenaries who fought in the
Uh,
Revolutionary War. I think like
damn, that's great.
they were for hire. I mean, they were tough.
That's
They
amazing.
were tough and wanted money.
Yeah, they're like, it's just like some German guy like, yeah, down with King George, and you're like, what's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, all right, buddy, like, where are you from? He's like, Vermont. I'm like, okay,
Vermont.
yeah,
Yeah. They're changing their name to American names. Hello, this is Bobby.
yeah. It's
I'm
like
going to fight for you.
it's like
Yeah.
fucking like when like Arnold Schwarzenegger has like a really American name. You're like,
I
all right,
know.
so pal, what regiment are you from? Oh, the Ninth Regiment. My name is Bobby Fischer. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
They're outsourcing
You're like, yeah,
battle.
it is very good to be fighting alongside other Americans. And you're like, oh, okay, you don't have to lie. Like, we know you're a mercenary. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I love that.
yeah. Oh yeah, I can't
Uh,
wait to go back to Disneyland and
yeah.
McDonald's. You're
It's
like,
like being at a call center in America, and then you have to call out to a specialist in the outsourced other country,
oh
and
man.
they're like somebody in Bangladesh. They're like, hey, and then you're like, this is Fred. And then
Oh
just,
man, yeah, because didn't the French help a lot too? They had like they sent like money and stuff because they're like because they just had their revolution. They're like, oh wow, America's doing their thing.
yeah, and they're like
And,
way better than you because that's all they do. And you're like, well, I'm in America, so I'm going to do this, but also my art on the side.
yeah,
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 they're these other guys are like, this is the thing I do for a living.
yeah, and like yeah, I mean revolution's cool. But I also have my woodworking, so I do
Yeah,
like this.
yeah. I'm
Yeah,
sure I'm a revolutionary soldier right now, but really, I'm an etcher.
yeah, yeah. I mean when the war ends, of course, I'm gonna fly. This can't even be my career.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's the same like being a career revolutionary. Like, all
Mm.
right, well, that's one revolution. Let's just go to the next country.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which Thomas Paine certainly was.
Dude, no, say what's his face? Che Guevara. Like he was like
Yeah,
they succeeded in Cuba. He's like, all right, this is good. Then he went to like Bolivia. He's like, all right, well,
yeah,
time for another country.
yeah.
And then he got
What
like,
I
and then he got kidnapped, and the CIA cut off his hands and stuff.
mhm.
Yeah,
And Trotsky basically,
that guy.
what he
Why can't they
wanted to
stop at
be.
one? Just you
Yeah,
got the biggest country in the world. Just stay there. You want to
I
get
mean, Trotsky didn't make it to another revolution, really. I don't think.
yeah, he went to
Eh,
Mexico and got killed.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
the his big idea was the of permanent revolution, and
Yes, yeah, permanent revolution, like liberating the whole world. But I think he kind of forgot to like be like, okay, maybe we should like get this one Soviet country going and then do it.
Yeah,
Let's do it now.
well, that was his idea, I think. It was
Yes,
just
yeah,
get this one going, and then other people will follow suit. He
yeah.
thought that the country most ripe for revolution was Germany, actually.
That is actually very valid too, because back then, like all the Germans were like super dissatisfied with their government. They're like, "You fucking put us in this stupid war. We
Yeah,
lost our economy." Like, and like the Germans just put like the Bismarck just said always like working class Germans to die at the front lines. Like, yeah, dude, they were like very worried that like Bolshevism would like take over Germany, which is crazy because then Hitler was like, he like blamed the Jews for that. He was like, "Oh, the German Jews sold us out to the Bolsheviks," and
yeah.
that's a lot of where his like anti-Semitism came from. It was
Mhm.
great, which is nuts because like I don't get it. Like I think like the Nazis were like, okay, the Jews are all they're communists and they're also greedy capitalists. I don't understand. Like
Yeah,
Jesus, like be consistent with your hatred.
greedy
It's
capital.
like
Well,
God.
there was that. What was it? What was it called? It was like some initialism, but when the Bolsheviks took power and they were having trouble with the economy, and a lot of people were starving, they like reverted back to a more market style
Oh
system.
yeah, yeah. Because I think in like the cities were fine, but then like in the rural areas, it was just like because they still had like landlords and shit. Like they couldn't really like mesh with the rest of the country,
Yeah,
so I think they just let them operate that way for a while.
yeah. The
Yeah.
kulaks. Yeah,
Yes, yeah, the kulaks. Yeah, they're kind of like petty bourgeois. Like they're like, oh, you have like one farm. You're not that big of a, But
yeah.
yeah.
The landowning class,
Also,
which
Lenin was hilarious because like after World War One, like he was like, oh yeah, like Russia technically owes a lot of other countries money, but I'm just gonna clear the debt, so we don't owe you anything.
yeah. And you can kind of measure radicalism by how quickly they thought it was going to be able to be done.
Oh yeah.
Just, but a couple of them were writing. I can't remember which ones. I think Trotsky may have been one of them who said that basically the economic system could be changed overnight with a big revolution, as that was one of the because they took it. There was that massacre of the peaceful
Yeah,
peasant
that was pretty
protest
bad.
outside the
Yeah.
palace, and then everyone got mad, and then the whole revolution happened.
Oh, the what was it Red October?
Yeah,
That bloody something some
Bloody
Sunday
Sunday.
bloody yeah some one
Yeah,
of those days. Yeah,
yeah,
it's one of
and
those.
then
Yeah.
yeah. So Bloody Sunday was when they massacred the peasants, and
Yes.
then they all sort of rose up and then the revolution itself happened in August of 1917, I
Yeah,
think.
it was crazy because like at that time, like Russia, like the Tsar had like sold out like half of Russia to other countries just to, like build their own shit in there. Like he was just like pimping out the country to like foreign factories and shit. And it was bad. Yeah, but then like most of the country like was farmers. They couldn't read. Like they had to like industrialize the entire country. And then
Yeah,
Lenin had this whole thing called like the like electrification campaign, where like he just thought that like by putting like power and like electricity all over the country that'll like help it all, kind of, which actually kind of worked a little bit, but
yeah. He
that
was
was
a
nuts.
he was a smart guy.
Yeah, but then Stalin was weird because then like Lenin was trying to like eradicate the family unit and like make women and men equal. But then Stalin was like, yeah, no, actually let's ease back into like tradition and like
Yeah,
fuck it up. Yeah.
he decided to ease back into tradition like he was sort of socially conservative,
Yeah, dude,
and
Stalin was
then
a scumbag, man. That guy was an asshole. Oh,
not good. And
yeah.
then economically though he was far to the left, really
Yes,
radical.
yeah. Yeah, it's
And
funny because
when
Lenin was much more like it kind of center. He was like, all right, let's just, take it easy now. Then
let's
Stalin
take
was
it
like,
easy.
yeah,
Yeah. And
let's
then
not
so
hang everybody. But that,
I think it was Stalin's idea actually to revert back to a market system because he
oh,
and Trotsky had discussed it, and then because Trotsky was his right hand man at the
yeah,
time,
but then there was a whole
and
discord between them.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then even when Lenin died, he wrote Stalin should not have power. He is too
Yeah.
crazy, and then that part
Like
of it was
Stalin's like,
just
well, I'm not gonna let this
suppressed.
little doozy get away. Like, let me get rid of
Mhm.
it.
But Stalin and Lenin were not on good terms by the time Lenin died.
No, yeah.
But then Stalin, after Lenin died, he made himself Mr. Lenin. He like pretended to be this big Leninist, and he was the
Oh,
head of the funeral procession and the head
Jesus.
pallbearer and all this stuff. And so the people started following Lenin. He was very clever. He was much better politician than Trotsky was.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
man, it's pretty crazy because that was like 1921 when Lenin died. So like they have a revolution. He dies like 3 years later. That's kind of sucks. Like
Yeah.
he like just barely won, and it's like he's died. Yeah,
I know. And then he
yeah.
just died. And then, yeah, he wrote that Trotsky had his faults too, but that he was the better candidate. And then Stalin just suppressed that document. Stalin was clever as shit. He had his
Yeah,
street smarts about him because he was a street brawler.
yeah. No, he was from
Yeah,
like Georgia. I mean, he was a rough guy, dude. That guy
yeah.
was.
And Trotsky totally underestimated him because he didn't know French and he didn't know German,
Yeah.
and he just, he knew Georgian and Russian, and that was it. And he had this Georgian accent. He was all short and pockmarked,
Yeah, no,
and
like he wasn't even like ethnically Russian. He was like a completely different part of the country. Like he was not
yeah,
even. He's not even like a Moscow, like a Muscovite. He was like a way from the Caucasus. Like yeah,
yeah. And that's a theme with a lot of dictators for some reason. Like Hitler, dictator of Germany, was Austrian. Napoleon, emperor of
yeah.
France, was Corsican.
Mussolini was
Um,
like northern. Like he was like way from some weird place. And yeah, it
yeah,
was very
and then it's strange that these outskirt people come in and start these big nationalist
yeah, no,
enterprises.
it's the same in Syria. Like Hafez Assad, like the Ba'athist, he like came from a very
Yeah,
minority part of the country, like poor. Then he like took it. Yeah, it was pretty
yeah,
crazy. Ugh,
it's
yeah,
so
it's weird.
interesting. And then yep, Stalin, Georgian.
Oh,
George Washington, I think, was born in England.
he's
Um,
also from Georgia. He's just like a thick, curly hair.
I
Yeah.
thought that's what I thought anyway. That
What's the
could be.
Seinfeld where George
Oh
like gets
no,
like, the balding cream and the Chinese
Bor
guy's like you have hair like Stalin. It's like,
Hair like so. No, George Washington. I just looked it up. Born in Virginia. A teacher of mine told me he was like English when he was young. He was just in England, and I
oh
guess she was full of shit. So, um,
yeah, the things they get away with those teachers.
I know, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Stalin. So Trotsky just sort of went and wrote all the time, and Stalin was called the man with the iron ass because he would just sit in meetings all
Yeah,
day.
well, it's why he called Stalin. It literally means steel man because he was like
Yeah,
he just made it. He just made up his own moniker. He's like, I was.
I'm a steel man now.
Yeah.
And well, they both changed their name. I mean, Trotsky was something really Jewish, and then he was at he didn't want his name to be that Jewish,
Oh my
basically.
god, dude! I feel so bad for Jews. They've just been having to change their names forever. Like,
Oh
can't get a
fuck.
break. They're like,
Yeah. And then
Jew.
Trotsky's
Yeah.
dad was actually a really successful farm owner, a really successful kulak in Russia, and then he was in an area where Jewish people were apparently being treated pretty well.
Yeah.
And then he went in, and it's funny because Trotsky was Jewish and then really downplayed it. He just didn't talk about it,
And Stalin
basically.
did not like Jews. That guy was pretty anti-Semitic. Yeah, he was
No, and then
not a fan.
Trotsky, by being as ruthless as he wasn't as ruthless as a lot of the others, but he was kind of a cold man when he was head of the Red Army, which is weird because he was anti-war. He was kind of pacifist when he was younger,
Uh,
and then he was sort of this idealist, intellectual, professorial sort of pacifist, and then he was put in charge of the army, and then he was responsible for he killed a lot of cowards, a lot of people who ran away from battle. He
wait,
was
so
like,
wait,
you fucking shoot them.
so who gave the order to kill the royal family? Because I always thought that was like very extreme. They're like, I wish just murder all the kids and like the.
The royal family were held somewhere like north. They was held somewhere up north, and then something happened. I can't remember what, but something
Yeah, they
happened,
were
and
just all
then
shot to death. It's like Jesus Christ.
I think it was Lenin.
Oh man.
I think it might have been Lenin.
Man, I love Lennon, but man, that's a minus. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a minus.
Yeah.
I don't think it was Trotsky. I think I would know if it were Trotsky because I know more about him than the others.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was some sort of
Lennon's like, I said take care of them, not take care of them, you idiots, you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
There was a I think there was the White Guard, I think is what it was. There was an uprising
Yeah.
of pro-Tsarist.
Because that was the whole like the civil war they had right afterwards. That was not like the white revolution versus the like other guys. Yeah.
Yeah. And then in order to end that, they killed the royal family.
Oh man, yeah, it's funny because they kill the kids too. Because they're like, what? Like, it's like a samurai movie. They're like, what if the kids survive and then like retrain and come back to kill us? It's like, what are you gonna do?
But
Like,
imagining being that soldier who was ordered to do that.
yeah.
And then you really believe in this cause, and you don't really want to kill a kid, but it seems like you have to keep it so that the white guard doesn't take over and have like.
Or if the kid was really annoying, like you're like, all right, I'm not gonna shoot the kids. The kid's like,
yeah, we should make a movie like Home Alone about the Tsar kids. And they're just like creating little traps around the house, but eventually they get shot. They get in and shoot them. They killed the fuck out of those people. And then Trotsky did not think that Stalin was a threat, so he just didn't take much action against him.
It's always that one guy is just like sitting back, quiet, and then he just ends up like taking over the next 10 years.
But that's what happened with Gorbachev.
Oh.
Who was right after Stalin? Was that
Brezhnev?
Was that Brezhnev?
Khrushchev,
yeah, that's who I mean. Sorry,
Khrushchev was actually kind of cool, man. He was a great general in World War II. He like fucking single-handedly saved them from getting like annihilated.
I know, but he was. It was really interesting because basically the same thing happened. I mean, have you ever wondered why in the Great Purge, when Stalin killed all his enemies, he didn't kill Khrushchev?
No.
Because he was silly. He was a silly man. And Stalin liked making him do silly things around the dinner table.
It's like in Death of Stalin when Khrushchev was just like a goofy dude. Yeah.
Yeah, that was real. And he would... Khrushchev just drank all the time, was super drunk and silly, and Stalin would just have him do stupid dances. He's like, "Hey, monkey, do some dances."
That's insane. This is literally the guy who like saved Stalingrad from fucking eradication. Ousted the Nazis from Russia, and he's doing monkey dances.
Yeah,
at the Kremlin. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Jesus Christ, man. Yeah.
I said the person after Stalin may have been Brezhnev. I was way off, by the way. He was like the fifth.
Brezhnev was like in the 70s, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was like way later. I don't know what I was thinking, but yeah, it's the most like Khrushchev out of the names.
Khrushchev.
But
do you remember like the scene in did you ever watch like Enemy of the Gates like with Jude Law? Where they had this like really funny scene where like all these like Soviet generals like fucked up, and then like Khrushchev was like yelling at them. He was like, "You all fucked up, you all fucked up," and then he like talks to this one guy, and he's like slides a like handgun across the table. He's like, "Comrade Stalin won't be happy to hear about this. You know what to do." And Khrushchev like just walks out, and then you just hear like a gunshot. It's like, damn, Khrushchev just telling people to kill themselves.
Yeah, oh my God. It's so funny. But he loved fun, and he had a great sense of humor, apparently. And he was a very good sort of engineer. Like, he was in charge of making it so that the subway system or the train system.
Moscow subway.
Worked really well, and he did such a good job that they appointed him to a higher position.
That's crazy.
But he was just a goofy man, and by sheer competence gained all these
wow
high positions in government.
That's really insane to me. It's always that one guy. You just never suspect him. You're like, oh, he's like not capable. He doesn't have it in him. And then he was just. You thought he was drunk. He was just drinking water the whole time, like spotting.
No, he was drunk, and he kept drinking a lot. Yeah, it's just funny that as he was piss drunk, he was just doing a better job than the other people.
Dude, Death of Stalin makes me so angry because it's exactly the kind of movie I would love to write, but it already exists. It's like so genius.
It's so funny.
It's so good. I love the one where they're all watching cowboy movies, which apparently was true too. The cowboy movie thing was real.
Yeah.
Like Stalin would actually make them stay up until like 4 a.m, like watching John Wayne pictures and shit. Like it was nuts. Yeah.
Like so many dictators are that way too. They're all from other countries, and they all love these weird genre things. Yeah, they all just love
Hitler
trash.
And Chaplin, dude. Hitler was like upset that Chaplin made fun of him, and he was like really mad about it.
I know. Yeah. It's so funny. It's funny that they all like nobody liked good art. They all liked sort of genre films.
Yeah.
And then Saddam Hussein just loved Star Wars.
He identified with Darth Vader, which is insane to me. Like that's crazy. And he's like, "Oh, this guy gets it." You're like,
Yeah.
all right, yeah.
Oh my God.
He's like trying to force choke his generals.
But
Not yet.
we all had that moment as a kid. We're like, wow, Darth Vader's the coolest. I want to be
Yeah.
Darth Vader.
I mean, to be fair, he has
And
that awesome chain necklace, the mask.
I
Uh,
know.
very cool guy. And he's
But
like he wins for like most of the movies. Like he's awesome. He just like,
yeah,
yeah,
just kicks ass.
yeah.
And then they decided to have Pretty Boy Hayden Christensen play him. What kind of actor do you think should have played young Darth Vader?
I have no idea. Well, because it goes back to Phantom Menace. They should have found a kid who doesn't have a bowl cut.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have no idea. That's actually a very good question. Hold on.
I'm thinking of him as kind of a stolid character, whereas a young kid, he's sort of a street fighter and he's tough, and then he's taught the way of the Jedi, but he has these hard opinions.
I just can imagine like a Tom Hardy, like a British actor.
Yeah, maybe
like,
not.
Boy, mate, you want to go fight these droids then, eh? And then they're all like,
yeah. I don't know. He's too much of a pretty boy too, I think. Though.
Yeah, no, yeah. You're like a more gruff guy. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, man, that's actually a very good question. Because no, I was actually thinking about Phantom Menace. Because have you seen that new retelling of Phantom Menace where like this guy had a case of how it's like a really good movie apparently? Because like
No.
Qui-Gon Jinn was like kind of the father figure, but then because Anakin loses his father figure, that's what leads to his downfall or something.
It's kind of like explaining a joke, though, isn't it? Where like
Yeah,
we all saw the movie and it was obviously bad, and then somebody is like, "No, but if you really think really hard about it, it was good."
It's like, shut up! It came out 20 years ago. It's like 20 years to make a good point.
Well, what's art? We should like art. We should just enjoy it while it's going on.
Yeah.
Which is why so many artists do that thing where they just kind of distill genre art for literary ends. I mean, they make it enjoyable first.
Yeah, exactly.
Tolstoy didn't sit down to think what is the best way to put this point forward. That's actually what he thought at first, because when he first planned out Anna Karenina, he thought basically this woman's a whore and everybody's gonna know it.
Jesus.
But then he just had too much empathy over time.
Yeah, it's just like because the worst way to approach writing is like how can I just bore the brakes off the audience?
But he was basically sitting down to write propaganda against women is what Tolstoy wanted to do.
Oh my God!
And then he was just
I know he was quite the incel over there.
Yeah, he didn't get. I mean, he got sex, but it was really weird because he was ugly and a lot of women liked him because he was a genius, and he hated them for liking him because he knew it was ugly.
Oh my God, that's like my life story where it's like, someone just likes you because you're funny, but you're like, but what if they like me because I was attractive? That'd be interesting, but it'll never happen.
But Tolstoy was a troll. He was a troll.
Trotsky.
Yeah. He looked like the depiction of Radagast in the Hobbit movies, where he's got leaves in his hair and he's got that big gross beard.
Oh yeah.
He looked kind of like that.
I wonder if Tolkien did that on purpose. Is like, yeah.
Oh, I doubt it. Tolkien didn't do much on purpose. I don't think.
Oh yeah.
He even said, like, don't try to figure anything out from these. They're just fun. They're just stupid.
Oh yeah, because I've seen people. There's like the theory that like Lord of the Rings was about World War One, but it doesn't make any sense that way. It's like that.
Yeah. It just he wanted to create some shit and did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm sure it was inspired by World War One, but I don't think he was like in his head like, okay, Rohan is France, Mordor, the Germans. Probably just
No, he didn't have much of a point beyond it's good and evil.
Yeah.
That's it.
Oh,
yeah.
Man. Speaking of which, did you see the Peter Jackson? They shall not
grow old.
They shall grow old. That my God, great.
Yeah,
I cried like 2 times in that movie. Yeah, it was so good.
Absolutely brilliant.
It was cool because I love when the British soldiers were talking about the German soldiers, how they actually respected them, and like they actually got along, and like they wouldn't even like point guns at them. They would just call hang out like as prisoners. It was really, really weird.
Yeah, like the propaganda machine wasn't as sophisticated back then.
Yeah, well, also because like there wasn't really a big cause, and they were all like working men, so like we don't even know why we're fighting. This is kind of
basically, and I mean nowadays you had after 9/11 you had people just hating all Middle Easterns.
I was sort of trying to run a joke about that too, where like I kind of don't like how now like all war movies are kind of trying to be woke, but it actually makes them more offensive, because because like now it's like all about the personal trauma and the PTSD, but like they're still killing tons of people, so it's just like, why are you making me so sad? Stop making me so sad. Like, what are you doing? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like it's like American Sniper. He's sad that he's so good at sniping. It's like,
Mhm.
I'm so good at sniping. I hit.
I know.
It's
I
like,
mean, that's one of those things that's so true that we should value human life
yeah.
that we don't think about it anymore. It's become cliche and we don't think about it anymore. And now we play these video games where we just kill hundreds of people.
I can't do the video games anymore, man. It's like it doesn't hit the same. I'm like, I just don't want to kill people.
I can. I know.
In Civilization, I can. If it's like en masse, in Civilizations, you feel like a genius. But like, yeah.
Yeah, I play a lot of Red Dead Redemption 2, and I
Oh.
try not to kill as many people as
Dude,
possible.
I'm very honorable in Red Dead too. I don't know,
Yeah.
because like I remember when I was younger and playing Red Dead 1, I was like a big outlaw. But now that I'm like 27, I'm just like I'm playing
Yeah.
like a real gentleman. I only kill when I have to.
Yeah.
I'll lasso just so I
What-
don't have to kill somebody.
Yeah, that's what I do. I ride into their camps and lasso them,
Yeah, no,
and then I like drag them around and get off
it's
and
much
hog tie
harder
them.
too. It takes a lot more effort. You got to really
Yeah.
try to. Yeah.
Or you can sometimes just run up to them and punch them in the face before they get their gun out. That's really fun.
Oh man, dude, Red
like
Dead 2 is
Yeah,
it almost that game is like it really does feel like you're in history, like in the West. It's so
it
good.
does. I mean, that was their idea with the game, and the point of the game is take your time.
Yeah, well, and it really has like killing does not like have a lot of it's like so quick and awful looking and like
Yeah.
just grim. You're like, Jesus, like I can't believe I just killed a guy. Like, you're like,
Yeah, the joy of that game is, walking around in a canyon
yes,
and then just hunting a deer or something, and you shoot your gun and there's that big echo.
yeah, and the birds, even like birds fly off when you shoot. It's like amazing. Yeah.
Just it's all the detail. It's
Dude,
just
no, I
all
literally
the
had more
fucking
fun
detail.
like riding across like a nice vista than I had like killing anybody for sure. Like that was
I know.
yeah. Oh, especially when like the nice music is playing behind you and you're like riding on an open field.
Yeah,
Ah,
and then
dude,
just in it's sculpture, that game. It's just sculpture.
the New York Times in an article they were like, this game is one of the like we should start saying that games are art because of this game. Like this is
Yeah.
this is like as close as you can get to art with new video games. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, we'll get better at it. We'll get better at that, definitely.
Oh, it's
Have you
beautiful.
played the game Night in the Woods?
I played a little bit of it. It's interesting. I liked it a lot. It was cool.
Yeah.
With
I
like the
think
little
that
animals and you talk. And I got to like I did like 10 minutes where you talk to your parents and shit. That was all.
Yeah. That game's art, I think.
Oh
That
man.
game's
Also, oh
beautiful.
shit! I forgot to. Did you play? Have you played a Plague Tale? That game?
No.
Dude, it's fucking crazy. It's like pretty short. It's like a very story kind of game, but like it's kind of like a fantasy history game where like you're like
Yeah.
a young girl in France and like you're like a kind of a small noble family.
Oh, yeah.
And
I've
then
heard of
your
this.
dad
Yeah.
gets killed and like there's just like fucking rats everywhere and like it's so scary.
Oh
Yeah.
my god.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
I'd like to
amazing.
play
though.
that.
It's brutal too. It's really brutal. It's crazy. It's like The
Yeah.
Last of Us with rats and the plague, but
With
yeah.
rats.
Oh, it's
Jesus.
good.
Yeah, I'd love to play that.
Yeah, I was mesmerized. It was good.
Is that for PS4?
I don't know. I have it for PC. I think it might be. I think it's like a
Yeah.
small game. It's like an indie game. I'm not sure.
What's it called?
It's called a Plague Tale: Innocence. But yeah, it's pretty
Oh.
easy. Like it's not like a hard game. It's like you can finish in like a day. It's not hard. But,
Well, it is for PS4. I'm gonna buy it.
oh hell yeah! No, it's good. It's crazy though. But yeah, so you have like rat powers. You can like yeah, you have to like the rats eat people, and you have to like it's so fucking scary.
Yeah. Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I was actually thinking like coronavirus is bad, but we're very lucky that there's not like an animal attached to it. That'd be so much worse.
Yeah.
Like you just saw swarms of rats around the streets, like I don't know.
Oh. Yeah. Or just even like dogs. The
Yeah,
dogs
easy
would
dogs.
actually be worse.
Oh yeah, just a bunch of plague dogs or something.
Plague dogs. Jesus Christ. Or bugs. Just like
Yeah.
ants.
Also,
Ants
because
and disease.
the like people getting infected, like because the bubonic plague, they actually have like buboes and they have like sores, but corona is like they're just sick. There's just
Yeah.
symptoms. It's not very glamorous or
Yeah.
cinematic. Yeah.
Not at all. Back in the day, you had smallpox, and they had the
Yeah.
growths and shit.
Yeah, it was easier to tell if someone's sick because then you could be like, okay, well, you guys stay over there. Like,
Yeah, or leprosy. He doesn't have
Yeah.
fingers or something.
What is leprosy? Is it just sores and shit on your
Well,
body?
parts of your body start falling off is what
Oh,
happens.
it like necrotizes.
Yeah,
Ugh.
I think so.
Oh,
I know that parts of your body start falling off.
oh, God.
Like I mean, there's a word for there are kinds of sores that have their own word,
Ugh.
and it's like I can't remember.
Lep, hold on.
It is something like that. It's the kind of sore that happens when you have leprosy.
Leprosy sore.
But
It is
it's got
called
its own word.
it's a painless ulcers, skin lesions.
Mhm.
Lesion?
No.
Oh, I can't find it. Damn it. How does leprosy kill you?
How does leprosy kill you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um.
Oh man. Yeah, no, it sounds like one of those. Oh, is it a long? Oh my God, that's disgusting. It's horrible.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. God, I can't look at that anymore. Never mind.
Yeah.
I mean,
Don't.
it's no wonder they put them all in colonies. No one wants to look at that.
No.
Yeah, it's awful. Yeah.
It'd be funny if they put them all in colonies and then the British start colonizing those
Yeah.
colonies.
They're
They
like,
like
what's this, a colony? Like, oh God.
we have to be part of it. Yeah.
They're like, yeah, like, no, because
Start.
we started calling it like leper resorts just so people don't.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, leper last resort.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh God.
Um,
It's like it's like one of those like sex hotels in like Jamaica,
oh my
like
God.
tourists go to.
They
Yeah.
have sex hotels in Jamaica?
Dude, yeah, they have those like weird like swinger places where you go to like do like hedonistic shit. There's literally one called Hedonism in Jamaica.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
I
it's
did
like
not
really
know that.
dirty. It's just for like gross couples to go to and like swing. It's not like hot. They're all weird and old. It's not a fun time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Gross.
know.
But yeah, about Trotsky. He was the best prose stylist, political prose stylist of the 20th century, in my
Oh
opinion.
wow.
He was. I mean, a lot of people say Churchill. I think Churchill just sort of pirated Gibbon a lot of the time.
Oh
And
yeah, he was like
I
a
think
long-winded
he
English
just
guy.
he hacked Gibbon. He
Dude,
like
yeah, I
hacked
would say
Gibbon.
Churchill had some good speeches, but he wasn't doing anything original. He was just being British. He was just like,
Yeah.
yeah, he was just like,
Yeah.
like he was just doing that whole thing. Like,
Which is funny because he had a fully American mom.
really?
Yep.
What?
His mom was an
I thought he
American
was
lady.
fully English. Oh shit! I thought he was like a long line like English person.
Nope.
Whoa.
Nope. Mom was 100% American.
Oh, I didn't know that at all. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. And then he became Mr. England. That's kind of the same thing of somebody who's not quite that country, and he just became Mr. England.
Yeah, it's the same thing like Hitler. It's like you're from Austria, you fucking douche. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like you're not even from.
So funny. And then we can talk. I want to talk about Churchill another time because he is interesting.
Oh yeah, no, and next time because I have realized that like we do just keep going like kind of like 1700s, 1800s Europe just because I think we just both know a lot. But next time I'm gonna try and have something about the Algerian Revolution in the 50s.
Oh hell yeah, yeah, let's do that. I'm excited. Yeah, I want to do some on Japan too because
oh, that'd be fun.
Japan's
Yeah, we
super
should. Yeah, but we're gonna branch out. So,
We're gonna branch out.
just so you guys watch.
But yeah,
we'll diversify. Yeah.
we will. But like so Trotsky basically started out just this intellectual sort of guy. Met a woman who was a big Marxist and would argue with her and realized he couldn't argue her out of it. She had points that were too good. And so he became a Marxist and married her. And then they got sent to Siberia because he was writing a lot of shit. And then they had 2 kids. He left her and the kids out there. And some people think
he's like, all right, well, I'll see you guys later.
well, they just had a house in Siberia.
Oh, okay.
And then, so they just got together and decided that he had important work to do. A lot of people think they decided that. I think he just bailed. But
it's like your dad going out for cigarettes. Like, all right, son, I'm just gonna go out to do a revolution. Be right back.
Yeah, and then he's like not mentioned in a lot of the literature about him. I mean, his wife and the kids are like not mentioned again. Like he gets sent to Siberia, I think a couple times more, and does not go back to visit his family. as far as I can tell, anyway. Like when they talk about him going back, they're like, yeah, and then he just escaped again. He just didn't even fucking bother to go visit his kids.
Yeah, he's just bored. He's like, ah, man, I wonder what the boys in the gulag are doing. I'll see you guys later. I don't know.
But he was a genius, and one of the tropes with genius is that they take it as a license to be awful.
Yes.
They're like, well, of course I'm
Even
a genius.
Einstein was cheating on his wife. Yeah, they're all fucking.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
I mean, the only genius prose stylist I can think of who did not is Lincoln.
Yeah, that we know of. We don't.
Yeah. I mean, he was very. I mean, that's pretty well documented, just because he was very
loyal to his wife. Yeah.
Very loyal, and
Yeah.
he was very good at deflecting other people's advances because he was tall and he was smart and powerful, and so a lot of women wanted to sleep with him. But he was just like Mary Todd Lincoln was very jealous, and so he would deflect them really well.
Oh yeah.
He like found a way to say it so that she wouldn't be jealous. She's like, oh yeah, this man is mine.
Oh god,
And
could you imagine like going to the Ford Theater with him? Like he's just trying to enjoy the play, and his wife is like, oh, I think she's making eyes at you. Why don't you go talk to her? It's like, all right.
Yeah. All right, Mary.
Okay, settle down. Let's see.
Well, there's a little bit. That's what's so brilliant about Daniel Day-Lewis's performance, is because he was able to meld the sort of
I haven't seen Lincoln. I gotta see that movie.
Oh, it's brutal. I can't believe you haven't seen Lincoln. Holy shit. I mean, Spielberg does sort of Spielberg it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And it makes it worse, but then he
no, because the reason is it came out, but I had this like really pretentious fucking professor in college when it came out, and then he was like, he's like, don't, I bet your kids are just gonna go home and listen to rap music or whatever, but you should really be reading the New York Times and watching Lincoln. I was like, oh, fuck you dude. Like, he literally made us buy a New York Times subscription because he was like, you must all be reading it every day. I'm like,
the New York Times, though?
Yeah, I'm like, this is like his measuring stick of an intellectual, like, you fucking
Also, Lincoln, like, it's a good movie, but that's what he told you to watch.
No, because he was one of those like classic, like kind of NPR, like pseudo intellectual guys, where he just thinks he can just read New York Times and like watch the Daniel Day-Lewis movie. Then you're like smart.
There's a story about Noam Chomsky and how he went to the dentist, and his dentist said, "You're grinding your teeth in your sleep," and he said, "No, I'm not." And he's like, "Yes, you are, sir." He's like, "No, I'm not. Ask my wife. She." And then she comes in, she's like, he doesn't grind his teeth in his sleep. Like, he doesn't. Yeah. That's not something that he does. And then he said, well, you're grinding your teeth somewhere, so just like watch it and see where you are. And it turns out that every morning when he read the New York Times, he would grind his teeth. And so, because he would see how kind of the news is just
fucking man. It's like, this fucking brag. I hate it.
Yeah, he would
I remember one of the funniest things that Marx did was like he like hated The Economist. Like he just hated it. Like he was like, this The Economist is a fucking rag. It's lies. I hate. It's the worst newspaper ever. And like just fucking like destroyed them all the time. It's really funny.
I mean, it's one of the only publications now that has any attention to good writing.
Yeah, it's like, kind of changed its note. Yeah,
it's like The Economist and the New Yorker, and then the rest are, succumbing to BuzzFeed style news.
It's awful. I know. Yeah, even the Washington Post is like, what member of the Korean ruling class are you? And you're like, yeah. It's like, oh, you're Kim Jong Un's sister. So you're like, oh, cool.
Oh,
yeah,
that's so funny. So yeah, he Trotsky just basically wrote. He was the Thomas Paine of the Russian Revolution, basically.
Yeah, like kind of the narrator of the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and he wrote a lot of brilliant stuff, and he was sort of like Churchill in that he would write the accounts of things that happened with him, and he would write himself as probably a little better than he had been in those accounts. Like, we should talk about Kronstadt, because you can't talk about Trotsky without talking about Kronstadt.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but he basically Kronstadt was a fleet of ships, and there were these sort of kind of how we have sort of leftist lit boys right now, these sort of leftist fuck boys who are really I don't know, they don't believe in it that much. They just kind of do it to get laid.
Oh, of course. I know so many. I was marginally one of those people. Yeah.
No,
yeah.
I mean, we all were.
Yeah.
what can you do? I mean, that's how it starts.
That's how it starts. But then you're like, yeah, I'll stick around.
Then you start reading some actual things. You're like, oh, there's,
It's not just buzzwords to get into someone's pants.
You can also get sex by actually knowing what you're talking about.
You're like, yeah, the proletariat, whatever. Anyway. Okay.
Yeah, so what happened is they were these sort of stylish guys, and they were pretty reactionary, actually. They had some ideas that were sort of going against what the revolution was started for to begin with.
Yeah.
And then they had all these demands, and then Trotsky thought, well, I'm in charge of, dealing with this problem. They're obviously reactionary. They're against the revolution. Everything must be sacrificed for the revolution. They're not going to give up the ships until we agree to their terms. Let's kill them. So they went in and killed them. And then it's funny because way later when it kept getting brought up again, and Trotsky was painted the villain because he sort of ordered all those people killed. Which you are in a war, so I guess if you're a general in charge of a war and you need all the ships to get what you need done, what can you do? I
mean, people forget the U.S. They killed a lot of deserters too back in the day. Like they were doing that too. It was not.
Yeah, man. Yeah, but and then Trotsky ordered that done. He was sort of the war kind of turned him into a cold guy. But to some extent, that may have been necessary if you're going to prosecute a war, which is why maybe let the Tsarists go on a little bit. Maybe don't kill all those people. Oh, just like
Jesus, yeah.
I don't know, but he killed pretty much the lot of them, and then later on he was writing about how is it Goldman or Goldberg? I can't remember.
I think it's Goldman. I think. Yeah, I know her. Yes.
Yeah, she was sort of one of the most high-profile people who sort of took their leave of Trotskyism after Kronstadt. And then later on, it became kind of a slang term in the left to say, "This is my Kronstadt," meaning this is why I was no longer of the. This is why I sort of left Bolshevism.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Like this was my Kronstadt, and then some people were able to say, actually, Kronstadt was my Kronstadt, who was really old later on. That was also a good joke.
Yeah, no, it's kind of the same thing when people were like, like that was like the Holocaust. Like, no, the Holocaust was the Holocaust. I'm pretty sure it doesn't have to be a second one. Like, yeah.
Yeah, Jesus. Yeah, that was my Holocaust. You hear like 5 people spit out their drinks. Like,
you're like what? Like,
yeah, and then so like, later on. Okay. Later on, Trotsky wrote a very fun and well-written, because he's an amazing writer, defense of his actions at Kronstadt, which everyone should read because they're fun to read. He's a good writer. It's fun. But he basically talks about like all these reactionary pieces of shit, and everyone talks about how awful I was for killing him. They were wearing, he talks about their bell-bottomed pants. He's like, they're fucking bell-bottomed pants.
Yeah, I killed him and I kill him again.
I kill him and I kill him again. Like everyone talks about, but they I guess at one point he says, I guess this dispatch is going to be as useless as the last one I wrote about this issue, because people keep fucking talking about it without knowing anything. And so he was really dismissive in a fun way, but he was so arrogant. He was so arrogant and vain. Like he would bring his train. He had this famous train that he had outfitted all for him. It was this Trotsky train. And then he would roll into a town, and then the townspeople would be gathered outside the train, not knowing what was going to happen. And then the thing would, one part of the train would just like go, and then he'd be right there giving a speech. And he was an amazing orator too.
It's like a tour bus. It's like Evel Knievel coming in. Like he's just like, watch out. Yeah.
he was a showman, and he knew what was. Showman. Yeah, he was a showman. He really was. And then he had his military uniform specially tailored to him, and then he wanted it to be different from other people's, and he looked like he was very handsome figure, with these pince-nez glasses.
Oh yeah, he had like the curly hair. He looked very intellectual. Yeah.
Yeah, and he flaunted it. But he was this amazing figure, and he was this dashing, roguish, very good writer and orator, and he was just
Yeah, I
very
mean, he
charming.
dated
And
Frida Kahlo.
he did when he
Yeah.
was sent. When he, I mean, he left a few times. There was one famous instance where he left to Canada, and they sort of kicked him out again. I think that's what happened. I remember there was uh, there was some weirdness surrounding it, but yeah, he basically was exiled by Stalin because he was a threat. And
Yeah.
Stalin knew that Trotsky was beloved in all these countries, and to kill him would incite outrage. So he just sent him away. And then he went to Mexico, and he basically wrote a whole lot of shit there and lived out his life for a long time. But he fucked Frida Kahlo a lot of times while he and Frida Kahlo and her husband and his wife were, and
Yes.
Trotsky's
Wasn't it
wife were living in the same
Diego?
house.
Her husband Diego? What's his face? Yeah.
Rivera.
Yeah, I remember they had a lot of like weird like arguments and stuff. Like they, yeah,
Is it Diego Rivera?
I think so. Yeah, like
Yeah,
it was strange.
it's so funny. But his wife just sort of put up with it because he was a genius, and that's what you did back then for
Listen,
people who were
honey,
geniuses.
I have my own train car. All right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think I
it
got
was.
this far without.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so he basically lived out his life there. He knew Stalin was going to kill him at some point. And so, I mean, he knew it especially after the first assassination attempt.
Oh,
He's like, oh, now I really know it. But his bodyguards were able to fight them off.
Were all the attempts with ice picks, or was it just the last one? They were just
That was the last one, yeah.
It's like Wile E. Coyote, like has like a different implement every time. Yeah. He's like,
but they were basically the first time I think
yeah.
was basically an ambush. They were supposed to storm the house and kill him, and then his bodyguards were able to fight them off, and they ran away. And then the second time, I think it was the second with the ice pick, guy came up behind him, basically put an ice pick in the back of his skull. And then Trotsky still fought him off. Trotsky was a tough bastard when it came down to it. And Trotsky fought the guy off before he could finish the job, and then just sort of bled out. But he is supposed to have said that basically that Stalin got his wish, were his last words. He's like, Stalin has succeeded where he failed before.
Oh my god.
But he was, I mean, to sum up, he was an amazing figure in history. Just very, very intelligent, like too intelligent for his own good, maybe.
Yeah,
because
that bastard over there. Yeah.
I mean, there's a real streak with intelligent people in politics and not getting a lot done, which is kind of broken with Lincoln, because and Churchill was also one of those who was pretty intelligent and still, they both liked good books, and they were able to make quick decisions. Trotsky was also a sort of man of action, but also liked good books and could write and all that. But there was
and Lenin was like a smart guy, but he just died.
Yeah, he just fucking kicked it. And then Stalin wasn't so good. I mean, his writing reads like a BuzzFeed article. I mean, he couldn't write much of a paragraph.
Because didn't he just kind of like regurgitated existing shit, and he was like, oh, this is how we should do it in Soviet Union.
Yeah, and he was a clear enough writer.
Yeah.
I mean, but he it's not literature like Trotsky wrote. It's just a shame.
It's sort of the same way with fucking what's his face. Obama was like a great orator.
Mm-hmm.
He's actually really good at speaking. But then some presidents are just like, all right, I'll just say what's going on.
Yeah. Obama's a great writer too.
Yeah,
I mean, I've read some of his memoir. His first one is brilliant. I mean, it's he has very surprising, clever ways of transitioning from narrative to dialogue.
Oh, interesting. I actually haven't read his like stuff. I've just seen his like speeches. Okay.
You should read Dreams from My Father, because it's brilliant. I mean,
oh shit. Okay.
More than a lot of writers I've read, his transitions from narrative to dialogue in particular and back are, I think, really seamless and lovely.
Oh hell yeah!
But they're like just how he does it makes you emotional. Just like, oh,
yeah.
Thank you, Obama.
It's why he was so good, I think, in his campaign, because he just like was tapped into everyone's emotions. It's like, see, I got you.
Yeah, I mean, he was a Trotsky-like figure in that he could speak and he could. I mean, in that way, he could speak and he could write, and also he, but there's a trope in politics, is what I meant to say earlier, about, the intellectual types sort of not getting much done because they're too busy thinking about, is this right?
Yeah.
And yeah,
Well, it's kind of the whole thing was they have tons of theory, but they never actually do it. They're like, then eventually going to be like, all right, oh, let's try this out.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then, do you know Thomas Sowell, the economist?
No.
He's a great writer. He's still alive. Kind of a conservative kind of economist guy, but he's fun to read. And he wrote the a book called Basic Economics, which is sort of
okay.
making it available to the popular reading public, basically. And he talked about why it was that he thought most professors are Marxists. He thinks it's just because intellectual types like to have a set of principles that they can argue.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of is a valid point. It's like, yeah, you kind of need them though. Like, yeah, you have to have some kind of foundation. You can't just be like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You do need a theoretical foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably why most political debates are so bad. It's just the people having them have no kind of basis. They're like, I don't even know what you are. Like, you're just kind of.
I know. Like Gore Vidal said, in American politics, there is no politics.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Like on CNN, it's just like this dude thinks this guy thinks. It's like, yeah, we don't know why. Like, just.
Gore Vidal said they're distracting us from the major issues with the fetus and the flag.
That's like very true though, yeah. Because other countries, it's like, okay, this party is like a Marxist party. This party is like this party.
Yeah.
So like, all right, I get it. But here it's like, I literally have no idea what differentiates the parties besides a couple of things.
Yeah, here it's boiled down to fairly unimportant issues, like
exactly.
Like where global warming's important, but that's it's none of them really have to do with the foundation of a state and what.
Yeah, or like economics. It's all just like abortion taxes.
Yeah, I'm against abortion. I'm for abortion. I like taxes. I mean, if somebody needs an abortion, they're going to get it done.
Yeah. Just
like if somebody wants a gun, they're going to get one.
It would definitely be nuts if, like, in America, there'd be a party where it's like, no, we want to change the government to be communist.
Yeah.
Would that be insane? Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like, no, like we actually want to, like, if parties were that different from each other, that'd be crazy.
Yeah, I mean, Western politics, basically everywhere operates on Western political standards now, but it's just a series of buzzwords is what you have.
It's so shallow. It's gonna get us all killed now.
It's a series of buzzwords. There are a lot of people. When you talk to people who are socialists, they talk about the Nordic states, which are socialist safety nets, kind of funded by shameless capitalism.
Oh yeah, they're not really, and they only focus on small populations. They can afford to do that.
Yeah, and where do you stand on it? Do you think there can be a socialist state that's pretty much all centralized, or?
Oh yeah, no, I definitely think so, especially now, because now labor is pretty simplified. Like there's a lot more technology and stuff. I think it could work because they kind of have that analogy of the post office, where in the post office anyone can work anywhere basically. Every position can be swapped. You can be anywhere in the hierarchy. It'll all work. So I think if you can generalize society to that point where everyone's kind of like, hey, I can do this job, I can do this job to some degree, then I think it could be possible. Yeah, and especially if you're making so much money that you can actually give out universal income and shit. Yeah, it could work.
Yeah, it's if we've learned anything from history, is that a socialist state is a very volatile thing to set up.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not very radical though. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, it keeps getting fucked. I don't know.
It's just, exactly.
A lot of people who are against it say, that's just basic human nature, and you have to take into account, the human question.
Yeah, well, it's sort of the dangerous part is it's still a state, and states have really the definition of a state at a very basic term is it's just a monopoly on violence. A state is just okay, we get to do violence, and that's going to be good for everybody because we're going to maintain this kind of status quo.
Yeah,
that's pretty much what a state is.
Who said that? Was it William Wallman who said that?
I think Lenin kind of says that a lot too, where it's a state, you have you're giving them the license to be violent, but in return they're going to give you the society. So that's kind of So it's like, okay, like it's legal for us to be violent. That's pretty much what it's. Yeah.
That has to be the best. I think that's the best description of a state I've heard. Is that
Right. Well, yeah, and it's kind of the whole thing where it's like, because pretty much like you can't just have a system without enforcing it somehow. Because if someone's like, no, I don't want to, it's like, what are you gonna do? You have to like arrest them or something. You can't. You can't.
Yeah. It's an institutional monopoly on violence, is how I heard it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And then kind of the dream is like eventually the state just kind of gets thinner and thinner and less important, and eventually it's just not even needed, and everyone's just kind of socialized to the point where there's no, which is why it's called socialism, because you're socializing or teaching a population over time to be a certain way, to which they don't even need a government anymore. And then they're like, yeah, we just behave this way.
We just behave this way. Yeah.
Which is the goal, but that takes like centuries and centuries, So
yeah. Have you heard of the book Rising Up and Rising Down? Some thoughts on violence, freedom, and urgent means?
No, that sounds fucking great.
It
sounds like my erection.
This is the description. Is the description on Google. Is a 7-volume essay on the subject of violence by American author William T. Vollmann. He's the guy I heard that from, but he
7 parts.
Yeah, but he writes more than anybody alive because he killed his brother accidentally when he was a kid and needs to forget about it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he writes 16 hours a day, legitimately.
Well, nothing really like a comedian who can't be alone with his thoughts. That's yeah.
I know. Like he's the most prolific writer writing right now, I think. But that alone, 7 volumes. He's got these novels that are huge and they're really experimental. There's one on the Pince-Nez War. I think he has a few on that actually, but they sort of blend stream of conscious with poetry, and it's really, really involved and strange. And
okay, no, cool. I actually, what's his name? Richard Vollmann?
William Vollmann, Vollmann. But he was supposed to be watching his brother at a pool when he was a kid. And his brother just drowned, and because he was fucking around, and then his
brother drowned. He's like, I wonder what a state is.
I wonder. Immediately started writing.
Immediately thinking about his book, like, why is the government allowed to do that?
His mother comes over. He's like, you killed your brother, and he's like, Mother, bring me a pen and paper.
He just starts dictating. All right, start. Just go. While it's fresh in my head, just start typing. It's like I gotta get this out.
Mother, bring me a pen and paper. I want to write. That's what Joseph Conrad said when he was old and when he first started writing. All of a sudden, he was just in a bar and he said, "Waitress, bring me a pen and paper. I want to write."
That's great. He just decided to.
We should read that violence book. Because it's supposed to be brilliant. I don't know.
I'll check it out.
I don't know anyone who's read it because it's
a giant essay. Yeah,
thousands of pages. But
no, that's honestly like one of my favorite like political discussions of like like what is a state? Like why do you need a state? Like is it necessary? Like like especially like prisons and stuff. Like should you abolish prisons? Should you keep some prisons around because rapists and stuff? Like
Yeah, I mean it's sort of like socialism is I don't know that it can be done. I just don't know.
Yeah.
Like I would love to think so.
I think parts of it can be done. Like
Yeah, certainly there should be. I mean, we should find a way to import the Nordic style social democracies. But those are founded on capitalism.
I would even take Canada, honestly. I would just take their shit, and they're not even socialist. Yeah.
I mean, nobody really is where it works.
Yeah, honestly, like even healthcare and like universal income, like those two would be, even for this like decade, like the next few decades, just those two things would be massive. Like
I don't know much about universal basic income, but
it's just like just like a basic income from the government, just so like that way there's no homeless, everyone can afford the rent. So that's all.
Okay. Yeah,
but it's interesting because from research they found it actually doesn't get abused, or not to the degree where it's like not worth it. Like because people generally don't like being unemployed, most people. So it's like
I tend to be skeptical about it just because I haven't researched it well enough.
Well, because the main argument against it is that there's always going to be those guys who piggyback the system, who abuse the system, which is true. There are going to be people who abuse, but that like the gains outweigh the costs, so it's like still benefits.
It's probably not good that I can only imagine that argument in a redneck voice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What were you gonna have? You're gonna have
Yeah.
You're gonna have these fucking welfare queens.
Exactly. It's like
Yeah.
just no one wants to have that argument because it always takes place in like a bar at like 12:30, very heated discussion. No one wants to have that
Yeah.
argument. It's always the
Yeah.
worst. Yeah,
No, man.
you're right. It always has like a redneck voice. Well, I
Well,
want some welfare queen coming in, some Shaniqua. You're like, whoa, Jesus! Like,
yeah.
yeah,
Holy
yeah,
shit. I mean, that as soon as I don't know, like I don't know that I think that I don't know whether I think that would work, the universal basic income, but when I try to put myself in the shoes of somebody arguing against it, I can't get the redneck voice out of my head.
yeah. No, it's interesting though. It's yeah,
I
cool
mean, the ideal would be to put myself in the shoes of somebody who's arguing against it, but not on a racist level.
stuff. I
But
just
I
don't know
mean,
how.
yeah, I just
Yeah.
would love to have that kind of empathy for people who are right wing. I would love to have that.
It's very hard for me to do that because I'm like, I just don't know how to be like your insane mind. Like, I don't know how to
Yeah.
like think like
I
you.
know. When you're out and about, you meet people who are otherwise, very decent people
Yeah,
who think crazy shit. And I think a lot of the divisiveness right now is just an inability on both sides to see the humanity on the other.
yeah.
Even if they
But to be
say,
fair, I would say one side has a lot more humanity.
of course,
Yeah,
of course,
yeah.
yeah, but you're not gonna argue somebody over to humanity by seeing them as inhuman. Is the
Uh,
point?
I mean, personally, I just think debate is already like it's already the ship has sailed. Like it's just
Of course,
and at this point, it's like just like war. That's
yeah.
all that can happen.
And I do think that's why the ship has sailed, because
Yeah,
people react in kind. If you're up against somebody who's totally racist and has just got some inhuman points, I mean, it's hard to see that they're also human, just
yeah.
like they find it hard to see that, people of other races aren't
Also, it's like, what am I gonna
are
do? Like
human.
debate so you don't kill me? Like that's just
I
ridiculous. Like,
know,
that's
but
ridiculous.
like when
Yeah.
you're set against that sort of person, like when you're arguing a Nazi, all you want to do is punch him in the face.
Exactly. Well, because
Like,
their like opinion literally is going to cause the detriment of you. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, of course, but also punching
yeah,
them in the face emboldens them and makes them more likely to vote.
right. But maybe you should be stamping in that, stamping them out like a cockroach just to get rid of them. So that's a
Yeah,
whole
but
thing.
but
Yeah,
but there's no way to do that in history. That's basically never been done.
unless it was legal. I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, in dictatorships like Great Purges, it's been done.
yeah,
But I mean, there's the only way to diminish those things is to argue them, and in order to argue them, you
yes,
have to let people say their opinion. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
they should be shown as stupid because their opinions are fucking stupid.
exactly.
I mean, they're
But once again, I think the ship has sailed because like just even the opportunity to make them look stupid is gone too. Because now there's like
yeah.
everyone has so many conflicting medias and this is shitty. But
I
yeah,
don't know. I mean, it sailed now because nobody's arguing anything with each other. I mean, they're just calling names
yeah,
on both
that's
sides.
weird.
I mean,
Especially when you have like a thing like this to fan the flames. It's
yeah.
like not
I
very
mean,
good.
the left is right on almost every single issue,
Yeah,
and it's weird that that the conservatives are wrong on almost all of them. There should be a balance, but it's not right now.
no,
It's just like
which is
it's
pretty
crazy.
scary actually. So that's
Yeah, and that's what makes it so hard to argue with people
yeah, because
in a way
you have to
that
have somebody to be them on to bring everybody in, but that's like
yeah,
a hard personality to find. So
of course,
yeah.
of
But
course.
anyway,
Like
no,
it's
I also just realized I think we've been going for like 2 hours, man. This is a good one. We had a good,
yeah, this is a good one.
but
Um, I'm still, I don't know. Are you done? You're
yeah, no, I
done.
think I might call it good.
Okay.
I felt myself getting a little fatigued, but that was
Oh yeah,
fucking great. Yeah, it was.
yeah. That was wacky good.
No, I'm actually. I think we should just keep like bringing up those questions though, because that is pretty interesting though. Like
Yeah,
those things. Those are the main debates.
definitely.
Yeah.
It is. But yeah, I just to sum up my stance on it, I don't think the ship has sailed yet. I think people just need to have a better way of arguing
Yeah.
because everybody's turned into a satirist.
Exactly.
It just looks like they're just trading memes back and forth, which is
Yeah.
the
Now like
worst way
satire
to
is
argue.
dead. Now it's just like you should just be sincere now.
Yeah, just be
Yeah.
sincere. Just talk to somebody. Like, look, I know you're a human being. You've got some ideas that are really bad. Like I can see that otherwise you're a decent person. So why do you have these ideas? Is the way to come about it. But instead, people are like, they're entirely a piece of shit because they have this viewpoint.
Yeah. I mean, I would say at the very least start with that, but then if they are a piece of shit, actually, then you're like, all right, never mind.
Yeah, I mean, if they start talking about killing people and shit, of course,
Yeah,
lock them
like,
up,
ooh, okay.
lock them the fuck up. But
Yeah.
even then, I would talk about rehabilitation. There's
Yeah.
no way to do that in our
But
system.
then again, someone's gonna be like,
But
"Oh, you socialists! You want to re-educate us in your re-education
yeah,
camps?" And you're like, "Oh
yeah, I don't.
God."
It was like, no. How about we just educate people educate you out of wanting to kill people, and then after you're re-educated out of wanting to kill people, then start arguing that you shouldn't
Yeah. I mean,
also hate
obviously,
people.
personally, I would love to make Wyoming like some kind of gulag where we just re-educate people, and then let them out. But
Yeah,
I think people might object to that. But one can
yeah.
dream.
No, I don't think re-education like that should be done in a for anything other than people wanting to kill other people.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, they're people who hate people and don't want to kill them, and they shouldn't be locked up. They should
No.
just be argued out of it.
Yes, yeah. I think that's like the most ideal situation is you just make them look stupid
Yeah,
with your points, and
of course.
nobody would support it
That's
because hey, these guys are dumb, and that's the best
that's
case.
that's
Yeah,
legitimately the only way to do it in history
yeah.
is to either kill all of them or be a good person and argue them out of it. And we don't want
Yeah,
to kill all of them because then we'd have to be the rehabilitated people.
yeah. Then it would just be this cycle of like like
Yeah,
yeah.
but I mean, there's in history that hasn't happened that I know of any other way.
No, I would say history has taught us that it's usually not the former; it's usually the latter, bloody, messy conflict.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Yeah,
if there's any kind of suppression of any viewpoint, like you have to kill them because all suppression does is make them bolder.
no, I was gonna say maybe it's why Lenin had killed those kids, because they can't have you fucking running around. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think comedy arises from it's like a slow leak of an idea that's not supposed to be talked about.
yeah.
So that's why I don't know.
Not to give us too much credit, but
It's yeah,
yeah,
it's a slow leak of sublimated taboos, basically.
yes, yeah, because it
That's
kind
what
of
I.
starts there, then it boils up eventually.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
but
Well, especially
that's
like
where.
in the 50s, like they kind of were being taboo, and in the 60s, everybody's like taboo because it's like
Yeah,
normalized. Yeah,
and that's what art is. I think. I mean, in countries which are oppressed, you have great flowerings of art. In Russia under the Tsars, they were being oppressed.
yeah,
Just not as much as under Stalin.
yeah,
um, you were just you had these amazing, beautiful, just ornate pieces of art,
right,
and
yeah. Well, because the
and-
best art is like reacting to the times and like
yeah,
but the worst art is like where it's just not even doing that, where it's like not
yeah.
reactionary, where it's just like ooh,
But what's
I'm in
interesting,
lockstep with
yeah,
everything. Yeah,
but what's interesting is that you have these very ornate this very ornate architecture, and then they wanted everything to be beautiful in Moscow, and then you had these Fabergé eggs were the big the most beautiful things in the world, and
yeah.
they were in Russia, and you had
I love
all
those
this
movies where
just
they have Fabergé eggs and everyone's like fawning over it. Like it's just a fucking egg. Like what is? Yeah,
no, they're amazing. They're
yeah,
amazing. And but I mean, when you think of Tsarist Russia, you think of opulence, right? You think
yes,
of opulence, but the literature coming out of it was very kind
dark.
of
Yeah,
down to earth, dark. I mean,
yeah.
Gogol was probably the most opulent out of all
Diary of a
those.
Madman. Yeah,
Yeah, but even he was sort of paid attention to sort of the rural side of
yeah. I mean, it's kind of the
yeah.
stereotype of like Russian literature is grim
Mhm.
and dark but that's all from like Tsarist
Right.
Russia. Yeah,
Right. And then I
yeah,
think a lot of writing comes from nostalgia just for one or another thing, which is why you see a lot of exiles among great writers.
yeah.
But and it's interesting that once that changed and it shifted and the Soviet Union became this gray, non-opulent place, you had as the greatest Russian writer Nabokov, who was the most opulent writer
Yeah.
because he was pining for that era of Tsarism artistically.
Right.
That's what
Everyone
I think
wants to go
happened. Yeah.
back to to their
Yeah.
favorite comfy time. Yeah.
Golden age thinking. I mean, the greatest writer of our time, at least in film, um, also very bad guy, Woody Allen, just talked about going back to you know, the time where there were all these candy shops, and it was the 1950s, and you had this beautiful music, New Orleans jazz, and Midnight in Paris is the best summation of his writing style, I think.
That was a good movie.
It's very good,
I
and
liked it.
and also he's a super bad man.
I know it's a rough.
Yeah.
It's a rough.
You just have to say it.
Yeah.
And then
I remember I saw that movie with like I forgot who I saw it with, but like they were just so annoying in the theater because every time like a famous writer would come on, they'd be like, oh, I know that's gotta be what's his face Hemingway. And you're like, all right, smarty pants, like I get it.
Yeah.
It's like, you know all the people in the movie. Jesus
Jesus Christ, yeah. But the best writing sort of drips with nostalgia in my eyes, which is why writing is not usually as good with science fiction or fantasy, because those are things that you can't really be nostalgic for. But the best writing comes around when you're just talking about the past in some sense. And I think a lot of writing, when people are writing about stuff right now, is just not quite as good. Just not quite as good. Like you have John Cheever, who, you know, his short stories were what the Mad Men TV show was based on.
Oh yeah.
Because I mean that's nostalgia all over it. He wanted to go back to the 1950s where everybody had a hat and there were ad men and.
But it's funny too because the kind of like like one reason I love the Mad Men and Sopranos writers because I think they have the same writers is because they kind of like play a trick with that nostalgia where like the characters are nostalgic but they are very troubled and like they don't they're kind of misguided by it though, like they're nostalgic for it, but it actually kind of fucks up their lives.
Right.
Yeah.
They just like the aesthetic, but just like in societies where you have a lot of great art and a lot of attention to great art, like Ireland. I mean, you can't talk to anybody in Ireland without them quoting poetry at you, and they'll but that's because there's a lot of strife there. Mm-hmm. You know, terrorism's rampant, or maybe not as rampant. I guess,
back in the day.
Maybe not as rampant, but you still feel those effects.
Yeah.
And right now in America, you have a lot of really good comedy because there's a lot of strife here. It's all under the surface and bubbling. Yeah. You know, and it's going to explode at some point, but I don't know. Maybe it can be diffused before it explodes, just like climate change. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, one of those things is going to explode at some point.
I think it's conducive to jokes like a ticking time bomb.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And then, and I think humor and joke telling kind of parallels that because you're talking about, oh, when's it going to happen? Oh, when's it going to happen?
Yeah.
When's the punchline going to happen? There's that suspense, and at the end there's the explosion. And I think a lot of the best jokes get written in times when things are starting to look very bad.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, like Woody Allen was the best joke writer of his time around, you know, the shit with Russia was happening.
Yeah.
You know.
Or it's kind of like in the U.S., like how comedy changed after 9/11. Like there was a lot of like interesting cultural shifts.
Yes. Definitely changed. And then.
But somehow comedy got worse after Trump, which you would think would get better, but it actually got way less funny.
Well, it's because a lot of people on the right feel oppressed.
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh, they're not letting me talk about this, and then and so they think they should be funnier, and they're making way more jokes now.
Yeah, and, it's because like people on the right aren't funny, but there's also people on the left who aren't funny. Like I'm just like, you guys are just all bad at taking a situation and making it good.
I mean the best people are sort of centrists, I think.
Yeah, or they at least know how to talk to everybody because that's what comedy is supposed to be. Like you're supposed to like make the whole room laugh. Like
that's what all art is supposed to be. It's supposed to be able to. I mean, if you have it one way, it's propaganda.
Yeah, there's no fun in talking to your tiny choir. You want to talk to the whole audience. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I mean, even with great art that's geared toward an elite, it's geared towards both sides of the elite.
Yeah.
Like Dostoevsky argues both sides of a question.
Right.
Kurt Vonnegut's talked about as a very anti-war person, but basically he's a great artist too because he talked about both sides. I mean, he says in one of his books, and he's really hated on the right because they think he's anti-war, and they just fucking hate the shit out of him.
Yeah.
But he he says, war might be a good thing and necessary. I don't know, but I don't like it, is basically what he says in one point. Yeah, it's just like, I'm just telling you, you shouldn't like it.
Yeah, it's like Slaughterhouse-Five. He's like, it was fucked up.
Yeah, it's wacky. All right, I'll let you go.
Man, that was a good one. I was gonna say she was be like one big one, or should I cut it into two? I think people will listen to it.
I don't think they'll listen to it. I mean, there was a point in the middle where it kind of dipped.
It does cut. Okay, I'll find it.
We're between where we were talking about Trotsky and then weren't and then were again. I think it got a little boring in there.
Yeah. Okay.
But I could have been imagining it. Just whatever. Yeah.
Oh, that was good. 2 hours. Jesus.
Yeah, that's rough. What are we at?
Yeah, we should have our like morning radio show. We were so good at filling the time.
Yeah, but what are we at exactly right now?
We started at 3:02. Now it's like 5:06. So.
Oh man.
That's not bad.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, cool. Yeah, if you want to cut it up, whatever you think is best, because I don't know.
Man. Yeah, I still think of the last one too. So I'll just put them all out. But here it is. Yeah, take it.
It was my research day, so I did a lot of the chatting, and I tend to think that I'm boring.
I liked it a lot. I thought it was good because we had there was a nice thread from like Shakespeare, how he's an artist, and it all came all the way to the end to like how Kurt Vonnegut, like that was all interesting. I thought that was good.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of good discussion there.
Yeah.
And also that my favorite thing is just that moral question of my favorite thing to watch on screen. Indiana Jones is my favorite movie.
I love Indiana Jones. Yeah,
it's my favorite movie.
I watched all three of those like 6 times during quarantine.
Yeah.
I keep putting them on.
They're amazing. It's just like I can't watch them
Temple
without.
of Doom makes me like really uneasy though. I just can't handle all the bugs. Like I just watched 1 and 3 mostly. But,
that's so funny. Yeah. Also, that's the worst one other than the newer one.
But I think 1 and 3 are just godly. They're so good.
Oh, so
also,
good.
I actually don't mind Crystal Skull at all. I like it a lot.
It's some of it pisses me off. I mean, but what can you do? I mean, it's a fantasy. What it was is fantasy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Indiana Jones is fantastic. Show. It's like God exists, basically. It's all kinds of shit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fantasy where just the Judeo-Christian God exists.
Yeah, exactly. And like he just has a bunch of weird punishment relics all around the globe.
Punishment.
Yeah, just to like fucking kill people with. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, like God is like obsessed with hubris. It's all he hates hubris.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, you want too much, you die. He's
like,
yeah.
And that goes all the way back to Homer. It's just
exactly.
The gods are just
you open the box. You open the box. Okay, you're gonna die. You open the box, you die. If you open the box, you die. Oh, yeah, stop opening the fucking box.
Yeah, the gods are just. Homer's amazing. Oh, I just love. The Odyssey's so great. The Iliad is also a masterpiece, but not nearly as good.
Yeah, I mean, the Iliad's like a fucking reality show. It's like, she was mad that he did this, so she did that. I'm like, all right.
But that's just a little. It's just kind of trashier than the Odyssey.
Yeah, it's like a TLC show. It's like Housewives.
But it's a lot of. I mean, it's a war story for men. This is for men. And a lot of it is, and then he put the sword under his jawbone, and then the blood spurted.
Like you talking to my bitch, bro? Helen's my bitch. Yeah, and like,
yeah, man.
He's like Agamemnon, more like, yeah.
Oh,
I'm not gonna say it, but you know what I mean.
Jesus, so funny. But. No, basically in Homer, the gods are just up on Mount Olympus. Is like, look at this idiot talking about how great he is.
It really is funny because everyone wonders what people do in heaven, but apparently on Mount Olympus, they just look down on us and fucking play pranks and
What a douche.
Yeah, just douche.
Yeah, it's like, oh really?
Yeah.
They're just trash talking up in heaven. It's like the comics
and binoculars, like, oh look, he's Achilles at it again. You're like,
it's like comics in a green room talking about open micers. Is what it is.
Like people didn't have this like beautiful artistic conversation. They're just like, oh, just see like his shoes. What a fucking idiot.
Yeah. Jesus Christ.
All right, man. Well, sounds good.
All right, we'll see you.
All right, see you. Take it easy.
You too. Bye. That was a good one.
Yeah.